Good morning, everyone. It's Val from TPL here. Thank you for taking the time to join us this morning. Apologies for the little delay there in getting started. The session this morning on Sage Intacct is designed really to give you an overview of the solution. In a second, I'm going to hand you over to Piers Thom, who is a solutions consultant at Sage, and he'll take you through the demonstration this morning. Just a little bit of housekeeping before I do that. The lines are muted. It means that then everyone can hear Piers nice and clearly. If you do have any questions, please just put them into the chat teams. I'll keep an eye on those and we'll cover them at the end of the session. I can also unmute the lines at that point, so if anyone would like to speak to Piers, we can do that as well. Okay, so with that, I'll hand you over to Piers and we'll get started. Thanks, Piers.
Thanks, Val, and good morning, everybody. First and foremost, thank you for giving up some of your Wednesday morning. I hope you'll find the session to be of use and some value around perhaps demystifying what Sage Intacct is, given that most of us will have heard of the likes of Sage 50 and Sage 200, but perhaps less so Sage Intacct. I didn't plan on going through any slides whatsoever, so I thought I would just do a quick introduction and then we'll roll our sleeves up and take a walk and talk through the software itself. That way, hopefully it maximizes the value in your time as opposed to you being subjected to 101 PowerPoint slides. So, brief history of Sage Intacct. It's a solution that was born out of the States that we at Sage acquired probably now about 7 or 8 years ago. It was available in the UK, but only through sort of our States office, as it were. And then what we did is worked hard to make it available to us in the UK, which it has been now for the last 5 years. I've worked here at Sage for, sadly, substantially longer than that, but I chose to move to Intacct because it's a cracking great solution, and hopefully you will see that as we go through the session today. Most of the customers I speak with tend to be on existing Sage solutions, so I'll try wherever possible and draw parallels with the likes of Sage 200, Sage 50. But again, the concept of what we go through is probably more of interest to you than the physical content on my screen, because the concept of whether we're talking about approvals or dashboards, capability, that's probably of more interest in exactly what's on my screen, because I might have 2 or 3 people approving a transaction. You might think that's overkill, or you might need more. So bear with me as we go through. The concept more than likely is going to be of interest more than the content, but we will be looking at Intacct, which is a true native cloud solution. The name Intacct derives from internet accounting, and therefore, right from the word go, it was designed to be a true native cloud solution. So anywhere that you can access the internet, you will be able to access the entire Sage Intacct solution. We take care of all of the hosting and the backups and the quarterly updates. So again, it removes that, which some customers are going through and find a bit of a chore and a pain and a challenge. I'm going to pop my camera off. I'm going to share the contents of my screen. And that should hopefully be winding its way through to you, my login screen. So we know some of the differences already. We're going to be looking at a true native cloud solution. We know that it's a tried and tested solution because it's been around in the States for the last 20 or so years and is now available in Canada, here in the UK, France, Germany, South Africa, Australia. And we know that all we'll need to do is access it using a web browser. There is another huge difference between Intacct and some of those other Sage solutions, and that is the ability to personalize the entire experience. So when customers move to Intacct, they invest their time with us because you know what you want to get out of the system. We don't quite know that because we don't know your business obviously as well as you do, but we do know the system, and therefore there's a transfer of learning. And that might be right from the get-go. What is the user's experience? How do you want your users to log into Sage Intacct? Some people want the concept of an incredibly long and lengthy password. They need it renewed every X number of days, weeks, months. They will only allow X number of incorrect attempts before a user is locked out. Or they might want to lock people down to certain times of the day. The idea being we probably don't want Val coming back in from a night out in the town at 3 in the morning and trying to post journal entries. Some customers also say we want to use the single sign-on concept and have our users then authenticated by credentials they've used elsewhere. And other customers say, actually, I want to use multi-factor authentication as well. But like when we're making these online purchases and we either use an authenticator app or get texted a passcode. So right from the get-go, there is no hard and fast rules around that password policy and the login process, nor around the browsers you wish to use, or indeed the technology stack. Run it on a laptop or a desktop, run it on a smartphone or a tablet, access the system using maybe Windows and Windows browsers or Apple and Apple browsers. Therefore, when we log into My View of the World, we are going to be presented with exactly that. Everything that we now see, everything that's on my screen, how my system's set up, any comparisons, any contrasts, any colours, any graphics, everything from here on in is based on how I've set my view of the world up. Hence, the concept may be more of interest to you than the content. So in this case, my concept is when I log in, I want my landing page or home page to be a dashboard. And onto that dashboard, I've then chosen exactly the kind of information that I need or want to see. And I've drawn some comparisons and parallels. I might have some information where I'm also bringing in non-financial data and maybe blending that with my finance data. So Intacct is great at really extending what used to be the remit of a finance system and becoming a system that can actually offer more than just the debits and credits. And we tend to find our customers thus achieve more, either with the same headcount or perhaps with a headcount reduction. But the whole rationale around and the raison d'etre of Intacct is let's do more with what we've either got or indeed less, and let's automate where possible. And an example of that might be delivering data to the right user at the right time. Because it might well be that another user in the organization, they may be interested in completely different metrics, data, and information. Dashboards are therefore personalized, depending on what your users wish to see and how they wish to see it. For example, in this case, we're maybe looking at my programs or initiatives that I'm running, and then I'm looking at my income and expense via those different initiatives or programs or projects. As a budget owner or departmental head, I might be purely interested in the state of play of my budget, my view of my department, and that's maybe all that floats my boat. And the beauty is by having personalized dashboards, it then ensures that the right people have the right information readily available, and either using a mix of conditional formatting where we have this color scheme drawing attention to parts of my organization that might need intervention, or using some of the graphics and the indicators as to whether things are on track or less so, allows people to see instantly what it is that's of interest to them and the parts of the organization they might need to intervene in. Of course, there's a traditional tree menu. So I've got my traditional tree menu with all the different modules and ledgers that I've got switched on. But instead of navigating from ledger to ledger, I might just want to have everything I need on a dashboard. I might have a completely different dashboard for a Wednesday than I do on a Tuesday or Thursday. I could have multiple dashboards, maybe a dashboard for month end that guides me through the tasks and the processes. The beauty behind Sage Intacct is that element to personalize it, to be able to choose what we want to see and how we want to see it on a dashboard. There's no programming, there's no coding, there's nothing overtly technical in the personalization of Intacct. For example, if I want to move things around in a dashboard, here I'm looking at a project manager's view of the world where they've got their expense claims that they need to approve. They've got some timesheets awaiting their approval. Moving things around is point and click, drag and drop. Removing items from a dashboard, again, simply point and click. Adding items into a dashboard, again, is point and click. I'll simply tell Sage Intacct what I want to add into my dashboard, and that might be a piece of data, a particular report, It could be a project record, a customer record, or any other piece of information. So the beauty is you can allow and empower your users either to create their own dashboards with the data, the tasks, the activities, and the information that they need, or you could create it for them and roll it down to them. The beauty is, clearly every organization and within an organization will have different requirements. A credit controller may be very interested in a dashboard that shows the aged debt position, who owes us some money, how long they've owed it, when was the last time we chased them. Someone working on the supplier ledger might be more interested in, well, actually, who are the suppliers that are due for payment and how much do we need to pay them? And others might be interested in a whole variety of data, details, tasks, and activities. If I just have a look at some of the other information that I've got on my landing page, not only do I have this key data and key information, including non-financial data, but I've also got some graphical analysis. In this case, it's maybe a supplier aging, but again, it could be looking at it from an aged debt position or a project analysis position. And if I scroll further down my dashboard, I'm now starting to see how and where Intacct broadens out and offers more than just a number crunching system. So Intacct has this concept of tasks and checklists and activities, and therefore I can keep on track on what I need to be doing and when I need to be doing it. I can have tasks that I either work on myself or that are perhaps being assigned by others in the organization. And I can then have this ability where I prioritize what I need to do and when I need to do it based on the tasks and the activities that my job involves. But as with everything in Intacct, it's not a one size fits all. There may be some bells and whistles here that you think, well, that's perhaps something I might never use, or maybe I might use it, but it's not mission critical. The beauty with Intacct, compared to many other systems, including Sage 200 and Sage 50, is that you switch on the parts that you wish, and therefore you only use the parts that will add value. So if you never want to have a to-do list or tasks or activities in your finance system, you would never go near that part of Intacct. Whereas other customers would say, well, this is great. I've got my tasks on Outlook, and that's another system. I've got my tasks in my inbox, and that's another system. We use SharePoint and other messaging tools. And therefore, if I can have everything brought together, I can then have that one environment where I can then start to do the financial data and obviously tasks and activities. I've also got, if I pop down here, approving journal entries. Now, we said the concept of what we're about to cover is probably more important than the content. And here's a classic example. You might be sat there thinking, well, we don't need to approve journal entries because our team know what they're doing and our team code correctly. That's fine. If it's not going to add value, then don't switch on that capability. However, other customers might be sat there going, well, actually, this could be really useful because sometimes we get new members of the team. Sometimes they might incorrectly code transactions. And therefore, having this ability to push those through an approval process gives us the ability to double check and just make sure that what's being entered is indeed correct before it gets truly posted. And then we have issues reconciling things further down the line. But of course, approvals extends way more than just journal entries within Sage Intacct, and we'll touch on some of those other areas where we can start to get visibility and automate around approvals. If I want to drill into anything on my dashboard, either a piece of data or in this case, the journal entries that I need to approve, I'll simply point and click. I do have quite a few journal entries that I need to approve, as we can see. And interestingly, many, although not all, have a little exclamation mark under the outlier column. Again, what I'm doing is making use of Intacct's capability that I find of value, and therefore I've switched it on and I'm using it. And that's the ability for Intacct to consume, digest, and learn the entire database, my entire company database, and then cross-reference that information with new transactions that are being entered. And an outlier doesn't necessarily mean anyone's done anything wrong. It just means that this particular transaction doesn't match the normal posting within my organization. So if I pop into any one of those journal entries that it wants me to approve, it will tell me at the top that there are 2 potential anomalies. And if I come down to line number 1, it's telling me that the site that's been chosen, the department that's been selected, and the nominal account is unusual. So again, not saying anyone's done anything wrong. It's just saying this is not a normal posting combination for your organization. Line number 2, it tells me that the amount of the transaction, again, is outside of the norm. So the beauty is, when we want to try and avoid mistakes and catch any early doors, when we want to avoid issues reconciling and reporting further downstream, we can use this kind of AI machine learning capability for the system to proactively bring to our attention potential anomalies or errors, and it learns from our response. So if I start accepting these because maybe it is a true valid posting combination, then it will stop bringing this particular combination to my attention. As with everything, there'll be some customers that say that's going to be of no use whatsoever, and other customers with us today that will say actually that could be really valuable, and again a further means of using some of that AI and machine learning. I've also got, slightly further down my dashboard, some information flowing in from external data sources. So we know that most customers will use Intacct alongside a plethora of other solutions. You might have operational solutions, bespoke solutions, intranets, websites, etc. In my case, I've embedded an external data source into my Intacct dashboard. That external data source is simply a website, as we can see, but it's not a static view of the website. It allows me to navigate and drill down and drill through as I navigate that other solution. So again, it could be that we've got a payroll solution, an HR solution, a warehousing solution, whatever it might be. And I might want to bring some of that data, or indeed bring the entire solution embedded into my Sage Intacct, which saves me hopping between different systems and gives me that true, clear view of the world. Having said that, with regards to dashboards, of course, not everybody wants dashboards with graphs and all the information and all the data that we've seen. Some people, for example, might just say, well, I look after suppliers, so when I log in, I just want to see my supplier list. That's absolutely fine. Again, it's very easy and straightforward for users to personalize what their experience is, what they choose to see, how they choose it presented, and in this case, maybe searching, sorting, or filtering on specific columns of data. So why do customers then move to Intacct over and above what we've mentioned around this true native cloud and the ability to automate and do more? Well, for some organizations, and again, it's only going to be relevant to those with the particular need, some organizations have multiple companies set up within their company structure. So within my Sage view of the world, I might have different companies set up, different parts of my organization. Now, unlike some of my other solutions that I might have used, such as Sage 200, Sage 50, these different companies that I've got coexist together. And by coexisting together, it means I don't need to log in or log out if I want to move from one to the other. If I'm looking at a dashboard or an inquiry or running a report, I can make a selection and choose what I want to see. Because maybe on my dashboard at this moment in time, I want to see information from my company number 2. In which case, the dashboard or the report or the inquiry, it will redraw, refresh, showing me just information from that company. You'll see I don't process in company 2, it's purely there as an example, but I haven't had to log out, I haven't had to log in, I don't have those silos of data where I can only ever see one set of information. My companies coexist under one umbrella, which is great because there might be times when I want to see my company 1 and my company 3 joined together. Again, no need to go and grab data from individual disparate silos. I simply tell the system I want to create a company group called 1 and 3, And therefore, when I run reports, look at dashboards, look at inquiries, I can be looking at things across my company structure. I can be looking at a consolidated view at the click of a mouse. And I can start to then share data as opposed to silos. Maybe, for example, there's a particular supplier that we use, and we use that supplier perhaps across some of those companies, maybe in company 1, 2, 3. I don't want to set up the supplier 3 times. That's madness. It's duplication and it leads to silos. In Intacct, I would set the supplier up just the once and then indicate which of those companies can make use of that supplier. So we avoid that duplication of effort. We give visibility around one view of the supplier because there is only one supplier record, and then we can get a true view of what our work is with that supplier, even though it might be spanning multiple entities. You'll see towards the top, I've got a couple of US ones as well. So the beauty with Sage Intacct, and the reason why I struggle to see how anyone could ever outgrow it, is the capability that it offers. If you're an organization where you've also got operations across the pond, then they too can be using Sage Intacct, using the exact same solution. And when they're entering their transactions against their USA operations, it will be applying the US sales tax and all the legal and fiscal policies. Here in the UK, when we're entering transactions, it's normally going to be subject to UK VAT and HMRC and making tax digital. So for some of our customers where they want to have that concept of one single system being used across their different operating territories, it's fantastic because it takes us away from multiple disparate localized accounting systems and creates that one global solution that can be used across different legislations and territories. Having said that, you would only ever switch on that capability again if it's of use or value, so you only pay for the bits you need. And that's the beauty of Intacct. I'm possibly speaking as a traditional bloke by saying that on my washing machine, it has 101 cycles. Truth be told, I only ever use the one cycle. And therefore, the other 99% are never used. And if I could, I would have bought the machine with just the one cycle that I use. The beauty with Intacct is you only switch on and pay for the capability that you're going to need and use. And therefore, while the system can grow and scale and be a global solution, that's only going to be something that you would pursue if it's of relevance. If you don't need any of those bells and whistles, then again, you would never switch them on, never pay for those parts, and you would have a much simpler and more straightforward setup. As well as sharing data, such as suppliers or customers, when we've got this multi-company scenario where they all coexist together, it nicely lends itself towards a shared chart of accounts. So again, that aids with instant consolidation, even if we've got different base currencies in play. So the beauty behind Sage Intacct, if I pop across to some of my shortcuts that I've got set up, is it has consolidation options that allow me to say, here are the companies that I wish to consolidate. So maybe my UK company 1 and 2 bring together with my USA companies. But of course, my USA companies will be in a base currency of dollars and my UK are likely to be a base currency of GBP. That's absolutely fine because what I can then do is I can tell Intacct the currency that I want to see my consolidated reports in. And then I can indicate what are the exchange rates to use for my balance sheet and P&L reports. And Intacct quite happily takes a daily feed of FX rates, or you can start to define your own if you wish. But again, with that aim of further automating, a lot of customers like the concept of not having to update and maintain FX rates themselves. The system takes a daily read of FX rates, and it can then use those in this case when it's doing my consolidations. Just to further automate, I can start to auto-eliminate any intercompany movements. Now, of course, I've got my consolidation working here across different base currencies, but the same concept applies if I've got all operating under the same base currency. Maybe I've got 2 or 3 companies in the UK, they're all GBP, but I still want to consolidate and remove any intercompany movements automatically, in which case that consolidation option would be great at allowing me to automate and then build that consolidated view effortlessly. All the data coexists together, even though the companies are different legal entities. That concept also nicely lends itself to intercompany transactions and movements. So if I pop across to a journal entry screen, and if I look down onto my journal entry screen, I can start to see that line number 1 of my journal entry is going to impact my company one, but line number 2 is impacting another part of my organization. So we start to have this concept of one entry screen where different lines can be impacting different parts of my organization. We're moving away from having to do half the job in one company and then logging out and performing the other accounting equation in another company. Because again, that's time consuming, it's error prone, and it's not efficient. Having the ability in Intacct to have transactions where individual lines are impacting individual companies streamlines and automates all of that intercompany movement and transactions. It allows for shared services where we might be buying something for company one, but the transaction will be paid off via a company two payment. Now, of course, behind the scenes, I've personalized the system, as indeed customers do, to allow or forbid certain types of transactions and certain types of interactions between the companies. And I've got mapping in between those companies that guides the appropriate posting, so we always have self-balancing booked. But the beauty is everything on the one screen entered the once without having to hop between different parts of the system or indeed different companies. Now that's all well and good if we are running different companies, but of course, not everybody is. Some people have a single company operation. And what they might want to do is they might want to have a better level of analysis than what they currently have. So typically in Sage 50, we might be used to departments, and in Sage 200, we got the added benefit of a cost center. Well, folks like myself and the team at Technology Partners who have been around the Sage solutions for several decades, we know that that kind of concept of department and cost center possibly hit the mark 20, 30 years ago when those solutions were initially designed. But these days, customers want to slice and dice their data by way more than just a department and cost center. They want more granular detail and information, and they want to reduce having to report in Excel, and they want the data to reside within finance. So the beauty is, within Sage Intacct, we can broaden and deepen that concept of analysis. So yes, for sure, if we want departments, then I can indicate to Intacct to expect departments against transactions, and then we can budget at that level and report at that level. But I might have different sites or locations, different contracts that I want to analyze in my organization. I might have, in my case, engineers, products, machines. So again, the beauty exists of you being able to personalize what these layers and levels of analysis are based on what your organization needs. Property organization might be interested in looking at information via different plots or properties or tenants or residents. A charity might be interested in looking at things through different grants and funds and restrictions. Project-related company might be more interested in looking at projects and tasks and milestones and contracts. A hotel might be interested in looking at things via occupancy levels and rooms. Conference and banqueting versus minibar revenue, etc. So again, you'll all have much better ideas than I've got as to how and where you want to analyze information. But the beauty in Intacct is it then ensures that you can capture data that's way more granular, and you can then report straight out of the Intacct on those key indicators, those key layers and levels of analysis. Have as many as you wish and call them what you wish, based on how you need to report or analyze. But in essence, it means that we reduce our reliance on Excel for reporting because the finance system has way more granular detail than just a nominal code and a department or indeed a cost center. So for many customers, that concept of dimensions allows them to truly not only record the data, but then view and report it. For example, if I pop across again to one of my examples where we were looking at the budget position over different programs or initiatives, it might well be that on a report or an inquiry, I'm interested in then saying, well, there's a particular department that I want to look at. And again, without having to go and rerun individual reports, I can make a selection, indicate what I want to see on this report, this inquiry, this dashboard, and it will be redrawn and refreshed, picking out that particular department, or in your case, maybe a particular property or resident or grant or fund, whatever it might be. So the beauty behind this ability to analyze over multiple and more detailed layers of analysis is such that when we start to report, we can then start to report at all those different layers and all those different levels and all those different analysis views. So it does become that kind of Rubik's Cube where you can twist and turn and look at data through multiple layers and therefore distribute reports to project managers, grant managers, fund managers, property managers, line managers, budget owners, whomever it might be. So that kind of dimensionality makes for much more granular and much more detailed reporting, less of a reliance on Excel and more visual around what we're recording and what, where, why, when. Some other examples of capability that might drive a customer to look at Sage Intacct and move away from their current solution. Well, again, if I go into my list of shortcuts or favorites, I have sales orders set up in my system or sales invoices. And if I pop into one of my transactions, I can start to see the customer as you'd expect to whom it's applicable for. But if I scroll down to my line level detail, I can see that it's a setup fee that I'm recording. I'm making use of departments and engineers and machines. This is where those dimensions come into play and come to life. If I tell the system that I want to be reporting by machine and by engineer, then of course those become available for selection and entry during transaction input. In this case, this is a setup fee for an organization, but I'm also then taking advantage of Intacct's ability to say, well, perhaps this spans a period of time. And in this case, I've kept it simple like myself. This is a setup fee that covers the entire year from the 1st of January through to the end of December. So maybe that's the contract period or the service period. I might have invoiced my customer and I might have invoiced them once, but actually because this value covers the entire year, I don't want to have to go through the hassle and the format and the faffing of manually deciding what I'm going to defer income-wise and manually deciding what I'll recognise and when. I don't need to do any of that because Intacct has its own capability to do that kind of income deferral and recognition on a personalised basis. I tell Intacct when and how I want to be doing those deferrals and recognitions. So I've kept it simple. It's a 365,000 invoice. I've asked for daily revenue recognition, and you can see the stats across to the right so far, what the system is doing each and every single day. So this is great because it helps automate what we might be doing manually. It allows me to have a cleaner and quicker month end because, again, those kind of proportions or those kind of postings are being done automatically for me without me having to come in and do them myself. And my invoice frequency might be completely different to my income recognition. Maybe I'm a charity and I'm selling tickets for a gala event that will happen in September. Well, I'm getting the money for those tickets just now in July, but maybe I don't want to recognise until that gala dinner takes place. Or maybe we're an organisation where we're providing a particular service and we've invoiced the client on the 10th of July, but we don't want to recognise that until the service is delivered, or the goods are actually delivered, or the service being performed, whatever that might be. So again, great ways of automating what we might have been doing manually and allowing finance people to become more strategic because we're doing less manual and more automation. Flipping across in a similar vein, but looking at it from a cost perspective. So if I look at one of my purchase orders or purchase transactions, couple of things that spring to mind. If I select my history tab, I can start to see how this transaction has arrived and the cradle to grave process. So my purchase order that I'm looking at started life as a purchase requisition. It then went through to become a purchase order. It's had some goods received against it, and we've also received some invoices from our supplier. So I get this full history and the ability to point and click and drill to any of those individual transactions. So I can see the cradle to grave process that the transaction has gone through. This particular purchase order, I can start to have a look at the approval history. So this particular transaction went to Bridget for her approval. And that's based on how I've defined my approval policies. So again, circling back to what we said, concept more than content. You might say, well, we never approve stationery if it's a £10 expense. That's fine. But we do need to approve stationery if it's £100. And we might approve that £100 stationery in a different way and in a different process using different people to a £2,000 IT expense. So the beauty behind it is all of those great approvals and alerts and workflows, they're all there waiting for you to personalize them and decide what your approval policy should be. And Intacct will then email and alert the right people at the right time to do those approvals. It can deal with multiple signatories. It can deal with the concept of multiple different approval policies. What we can also start to do, if I pop back into that purchase order, is if I scroll down towards the bottom, I can start to then make sure that if I've gone to the time and trouble of having budgets set up, then I can have the system monitor, check, and verify and validate against that budget. So in this case, it's telling me for the period in question, I had a certain budget. I've got an actual of that, and that's my state of play. Now, how have I managed to get an actual when my budget was only that? Well, that's the way I've personalized Intacct. I've told Intacct that, yes, I do need to be getting visibility of the budgets, but I've said in true real life circumstances, if we need to buy something, we need to buy it. So I've allowed my budget to be breached or indeed exceeded. You might completely disagree and say if the budget is about to be exceeded, we want to block the user, stop them in their tracks, we want to alert the budget owner, etc. Again, the beauty is there's not a one size fits all. How the system responds when we get that potential negative impact on budget is 100% based on how I've set my system up and how I've told it I want to deal with those scenarios and those situations. If I scroll further down, that item, that purchase, down towards the bottom, again, switch it on if you see value. Don't if you don't. But what I'm using is Intacct's messaging or collaboration capability. So I can start to engage with colleagues and co-workers and build up a conversation of who said what, where, why, when. So you can see in this case, I've messaged a colleague and I've maybe given her some explanatory details or additional information about this transaction. You might have created a journal entry and you want to just put a little note in or mention to a colleague what you've done and why. But by building up this talk track and the audit trail, it means we've got a level of accountability, we've got visibility, we're removing these conversations out of people's heads, we're taking them out of individuals' inboxes, and we're ensuring that the transaction has not only the debit and credit audit trail, as well as the complete approval audit trail, but it has the talk track of who said what, where, why, when. So when we get our auditors in and they start quizzing us as to what we did and why we did it way back 6-9 months, the answers are actually there within the system without us having to scratch our head and look at each other around the room. Other areas where we can then start to, again, enhance or deliver additional capability and automate. And that might be around, for example, approvals when we have supplier invoices. Maybe we don't use purchase ordering. Maybe we don't have a formalized purchase ordering process, and therefore maybe we only get purchase invoices, in which case they can also go through an approval process. I can see I've got one that I need to approve here, and I can either drill into that transaction or approve it. But of course, the person doing this approval might be a budget owner or a departmental manager or a project manager. He or she might not be part of the finance team, and therefore they might not be in the finance system. Well, that's no worries, because Intacct will email and notify people as and when there are transactions they need to approve. and it will send an email with a hyperlink on there that allows the recipient to then go in and either make that approval or potentially decline it should they wish. But the beauty is we start to connect together different parts within an organization, different people within the organization, and remove those kind of silos and divisions, because Intacct allows us to collaborate, communicate, and interact and exchange with everybody in the organization, not just those who sit under the finance team. And I'm a bit of a control freak, so as well as approving purchase orders, as well as approving purchase invoices, when we come to run suggested payments in Sage Intacct, I'm again putting that through an approval process. Now, some customers will say you're going to create treacle. You know, if you have lots of different approvals, then that's going to be a situation of treacle. But other customers will say, well, that's perfectly sensible to have this approval policy, because we don't want to have one person being able to run a payment run and actually press the button to make the payments. We've all read about what can happen when perhaps any one person has the ability to create suppliers, enter transactions, and pay them off. And therefore, if you want delegation of duty, and again, levels of accountability whilst automating approvals, it might be the case that I can run the suggested payment report, and then actually it's Val, for example, who makes the final decision to approve and authorize those payments. So again, lots of different ways of helping keep control, get visibility, get a level of accountability, even if an organization's growing, and doing that with either the same headcount or less, by just working a bit smarter and using Intacct's capability to do more than just debits or credits. And when it comes to the likes of reporting, we've touched on some of those areas, maybe dashboards, getting visibility of data, using conditional formatting. But of course, everything in Intacct I can drill down and drill through. So if I've had income of a certain value, and maybe I want to just verify or validate, I can self-serve. I don't need to come knocking on the finance team's door. So as a project manager, budget owner, departmental head, I can be self-serving, looking at my view of the world and drilling down to verify and validate, all the way down to source transactions. And of course, that goes across all parts of the system. You know, if I'm looking at something here where I've got the average tuition fee per student, I'll point and click onto that piece of data, or click onto the average annual tuition amount rather, and I'll drill down into that level of detail, including all the way down to the individual transactions. So we tend to find that finance teams comment that they become more strategic because they are doing significantly less mundane and manual work. They tend to appreciate that others in the organization are self-serving and setting and consuming their own data, their own view of the world in an easy to view format. Another customer said, well, we want to take that one stage further. We want to have the concept of running report packs, where at month end, the system creates multiple different reports and sends them to our users. Or indeed, it might well be the case, if I look through my list of shortcuts or favorites here, it might well be the case that actually what I want to do is have reports set up to auto run on a basis of my choosing. So I've got maybe a general ledger report that I might run, and I can then tell Intacct to run that particular report, send and distribute it to the particular recipients, and choose the format. You know, maybe one of my team wants it in Excel, another member of the organization wants it in a PDF, another member wants it using the graphical formats, another wants the traditional rows and columns. So there's tons within Sage Intacct that potentially delivers that level of automation, additional capability across the board, whether that be multi-company, intercompany, whether it be this multi-dimensional view to start to analyze the data through different lenses, whether it be the approvals and the alerts and the notification and the workflow, or whether it be the case that actually, you know, we truly want to automate what we're doing manually to the point of we're getting invoices coming in from our suppliers. I've got a list here of all my different supplier invoices, and I can see if I go across to the right-hand side that maybe the half dozen or so at the top have come in by email. So Intacct's offering me that capability whereby I can say to my suppliers, email in your invoices. Intacct will then digitally digest what is being sent. It will read the document from the supplier, and it will then create the corresponding financial transaction. And then, of course, that might be routed for approval. You'll see in my case, it's flagging that there might be some potential duplicates. And also, if I scroll further down, there was an invoice that came in where it couldn't find the supplier. And that might be, maybe it's a brand new supplier whom we've not yet set up or not yet fully transacted with. But the beauty is, whatever that layering and level of automation, visibility, reporting, etc., that's the real key areas for customers when they want to move from the traditional solutions into the true cloud. Yes, there are other areas in Intacct. There's a full-blown inventory module, and some customers are driven by a need for better inventory control, better warehousing management. Some customers are driven by better project management. There may be a project company and they need to have that visibility around the projects that they're working, in which case they might be interested in some of that project capability. It's a very unique decision moving from one solution to another. Typically, there has to be a key driver. We don't wake up and change system lightly. And from my experience, having worked with Sage for many years and worked with Intacct since 2019 when it came into the UK, the customers that I speak with are wide and varied in a whole variety of different industries. Some of them have got particular needs, but there is normally a recurring theme of let's get more modern, let's move to the cloud, let's reduce our cost of ownership, and let's get visibility, accountability, and actually let's start to automate what we're doing manually, and let's start to achieve more with either the current headcount or indeed less. I appreciate we've covered a lot of different areas, and there's a heck of a lot more that we could cover, and every customer with us today will be unique in their needs and their requirements and where they are in their current path and their process and their current systems, etc. But hopefully it's given you a bit of a taster into some of the key reasons why customers are moving from some of the older traditional systems onto Sage Intacct. Zaf, Val, and the entire team at Technology Partners have a wealth of knowledge and experience in helping customers transition to the most appropriate solution. And therefore, if there are areas that you've seen today that perhaps you want to dig a bit deeper in, question a wee bit more on, or indeed areas that we didn't have time to show, I urge you to engage with Zaf and his team, because they very much are the local extension of Sage, and they're the best people to take discussions forward on a more tailored basis, not least because, as we know, Intacct's that modular solution where it's not a one-size-fits-all. With that in mind, I will pass back to Val to see if there are any questions that have come through.
It is. No, we don't have anything in the chat so far. What I will do, if there is anyone who would like to sort of speak and ask a question, I have just allowed access to the mic for everyone. So if if you'd like to ask anything, please feel free just to come off mute and ask whatever you need. We'll just give that a second in case anyone wants to do that.
Is it possible to see how you would open and close periods? Does it work exactly the same way as the current Sage 200?
Sure. Okay, great question. So again, that capability is there, whereby if I pop into my sales or my purchase ledger, I've got that ability to then go in and perform either a closing of my sales ledger or an opening of that. The kind of difference is if I'm running it through a multi-company or multi-entity, I can then start to do that maybe across multiple entities at the same time. But it's that kind of concept of I choose the period, I choose the ledger, and I choose which ones I want to open or close. And of course, I might want to restrict that. So maybe I can close a particular ledger, close the sales, but not the purchase. Maybe you allow me to reopen the purchase, but not the sale. So again, you can have those kind of hard and fast month-end processes if you wish. And then that obviously leads to the question of, well, what happens when we get a transaction in dated June, even though we're now in July? So again, some choices as to how you would want the system to handle that and what you would want the postings to be. But for sure, you can have that kind of scenario of closure down at month end. Most of our customers do embark on that, to be fair. I have worked with a few that choose not to. It's each decision and everybody to their own, but many people will take advantage of that capability.
Piers.
Sorry, and if you wanted to, could you close all ledgers across of individual companies, or in fact all companies?
You could do so. It'd be a case of going into the individual ledger, whether that's my nominal or my accounts receivable or payable, and then choosing, is it for one particular company that I want to do it for? Is it maybe just my company one I'm interested in, or is it my company 1 and 3? So again, using that concept of creating company groups, I can then perform actions across multiple parts of my organization. I don't necessarily have to go into each individual company and perform the action. The beauty with Intacct having those companies coexisting is we start to share data and we start to speed up those kind of global changes without hopping in and out of different companies.
Sorry, and could you do all ledgers at the same time as well? So sales ledger, purchase ledger, cash books, and nominal ledgers. Can you pick that?
You can, but it's a case of going into each ledger. So I'll go into accounts receivable and perform it in there, and then I would go into my supplier ledger and perform the close in there. So it is split out ledger by ledger. So in that case, it's not a case of pressing one button and everything happens. I would go into the particular ledgers. And the reason we tend to do that, and again, every customer is different, we tend to find that customers who are using Intacct are businesses who are perhaps growing, and they have maybe very defined people and processes. So, I will be allowed to do something in one ledger, but might not even be able to see the other ledger, or I can maybe add something to one ledger, but I can't edit what's there. Or maybe I can edit existing data, but I can't add new data. So it does tend to be, in this case, segregated ledger by ledger, but the ability I could have those tasks maybe on a dashboard if I wanted, and therefore 2 or 3 clicks would allow me to come into my sales and my purchase and my nominal, and then choose the different companies and perform that either closure or opening.
Okay, thanks, Piers. I don't know if anyone else has anything they'd like to ask at this point.
Yeah, the only, sorry, Vassos here. Can you hear me all right? Yeah.
Yes, Vassos, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, what I was going to ask is the price. I mean, this is a really excellent software and all singing, all dancing. Is there what's the minimum, say, for, just one company? Do you have that, or is that something that I'll need to speak to Zaf about?
I would certainly encourage speaking to Zaf, and the reason for that, and it's probably one of the most often questions that I get asked, and it's a very fair and valid question. There are normally a few different elements to consider. One of them would be the capability and the modules and the features that you might need. So, for example, some customers say we don't need foreign currency, so they would never switch on that part. And others would say, well, we desperately need foreign currency. So it will very much be dependent on the features and the bells and whistles that you envisage using. It's also dependent on the individual users that you have. And we've got lots of different user licenses, because people who just want to view data and run a report, we don't want them having to pay the same as a full member of the finance team. And likewise, someone who wants to maybe approve transactions against their project shouldn't be paying the same amount as a full finance user. So there's normally a few variables that go into the mix, and that can be the number of companies, the number of users and the tasks that they will perform, and the modules or functionality that you need. So, I've seen some very simplistic setups of Sage Intacct, and I've also seen some very sophisticated setups. Suffice to say, the more modules and users and companies, the higher the cost, but it's the same solution. So I've worked with customers where they've got a one company setup and a few people in finance. They just needed capability they didn't get elsewhere. But I've also worked with customers who are using the same Intacct solution, but they're operating with several dozen finance members and transactions running into the hundreds of thousands across multiple companies. So please speak to Zaf, and they will do a much more detailed and specific tailored quotation. And therefore, you'll get visibility of what that price will be, because it will vary from one customer to another quite significantly, depending on those needs.
Okay, that's great. Thanks for that. It makes sense. Thank you.
Other questions that sometimes get asked is what happens to my existing data? So again, Zaf and the team at Technology Partners, I would encourage you to interact and engage with them. Depending on what your current solution is, there are sometimes ways and means of retaining access to your current solution, but under a read-only license, and then moving across maybe a couple of years worth of data into Sage Intacct. That data mapping and that data cleansing and that entire migration process, again, is best discussed with Zaf and the team, because only you and they will be able to sit down and look at what data you might want to bring into a new system. Only you and they will know how to cleanse the existing data that you've got. And then you might want to use it as an opportune moment to restructure a chart of accounts and to make use of some of the analysis that we maybe didn't get elsewhere. So for a lot of customers, that whole migration process, the tasks that are involved, the times it will take, and who needs to do what, are great conversations, but they're normally very personalized conversations with Zaf and the team. The beauty is this is what Zaf and Technology Partners do day in and day out. We at Sage, we don't have, all the infrastructure to start to go into the level of detail with our customers that Zaf can. The beauty of having partners like Zaf and the team is they are very much, as I mentioned, that local extension of Sage. So if only to have a conversation around potential costs or potential capability, I would urge and encourage you to have that conversation with Zaf. There's nothing to lose, and quite often there's a substantial amount to gain.
Okay, thanks very much, Piers. I think, Resh, I think we may have a question.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, please. My colleague Peter, he spoke about the month-end closures. What about the procedure for the year-end closure? After you close a year-end, does it still have the capability like Sage 200 to post prior year journals?
That's a great question, and yes, it does. You can set up specific journal types, and then you can assign those to certain users. So maybe you've got a journal type called a prior year journal, and maybe you want Val to be able to access that, or your accountants or auditors, but maybe not myself. So yes, it has got that kind of concept whereby if you do go through the year-end process, you have that ability to then post those prior year journals. And again, controlling that to who's done what, where, why, when, is normally what I see customers doing, because the auditing and the security in Intacct is poles apart from the likes of 250. You can be very, very controlling in what I can see, what I can do, and even simple things of, what have I done? So again, if I have a look, just 2 seconds, having a look at list of my shortcuts or favorites, if I've got suppliers in here. A common challenge for customers that are maybe using some of the other Sage solutions might be, we've got that scenario whereby, someone has changed something and we don't really know what, where, why, when. Well, if I pop into Lyrico, my stationery supplier, as an example, for me to be able to see this record, well, first of all, I would have had to have that permission to do so. So you might have allowed me to see it or not. But I've also then got this audit trail. So if I've changed anything in the supplier record, it's going to run through this audit trail. What did I change? When did I change it? What was the before value? What's the after value? And of course, as you would expect, and should you wish, the beauty is that those kind of changes that you might do can go through an approval process. So you might want to have that kind of concept of, well, actually, we will let someone make a change to a particular record, but then we push it through an approval process. So lots of different ways of allowing me to either do and see data and information, and then lots of auditing around what I have done and when I've done it. And that combined with approvals, alerts, and workflows really allows you to lock the system down and have tight control and reign. Whereas with some of the other Sage systems, if you allow me into supplier ledger, I can pretty much do what I want. And then everybody's left scratching their head wondering who, what, where, why, when.
Okay, thanks. And you might have touched on this already. Sorry, I lost connection for 10 minutes or so. The interaction with Excel. Is that similar to what we currently have with Sage 200?
Depends.
Where we import our transactions into Excel and produce a set of management accounts within Excel.
You can do, and it depends on exactly which way you're doing it in Excel. There's a few different options with the likes of Sage 200, but for sure I can either do standard imports. So if I again look at my list of shortcuts or favorites, I can import data across all parts of the system. So that might be budgets that I've created in Excel or transactions I've created in Excel. I can then export to Excel if I wish. And there are lots of different ways of bringing that data in and also then pushing that data out. So probably depends on the exact way that you're using. Some people are using Excel with kind of, the ribbon toolbar at the top, send to Sage and things, and others aren't. So it depends on the level of automation you've got. But for sure, if you're creating and entering transactions into Excel, there are a few different ways of effortlessly bringing that through, so we don't have to roll our sleeves up and rekey or retype.
Okay, yeah, because currently we're refreshing within Excel for live data to be imported into the Excel spreadsheet. I assume that can be done as well on Interact.
It can indeed, if I'm running reports or looking at a particular list of screens, I can be exporting that into Excel. So again, depends whether I've got a particular Excel format where I've got specific cells that need to be populated with specific data. If that's an option, if I've already got these highly formatted Excel options, then yes, there's ways and means of achieving that where the data is populated into specific places on my spreadsheets and my report packs. I can also then take any report and then put it into Excel. I would also question, and it is probably not the best time to do it over a remote session, but I would always question with the customer around what they're doing in Excel and why. And my reason for asking that is very often I find out that customers are extensively using Excel because of a limitation of their current Sage system. And very often, of course, I'm not going to pretend in all cases, but very often their use of Excel can be significantly reduced because of the better reporting capability in Intacct and the better levels of granularity around data. So again, wouldn't kid on and say it's in every single case, but I would say most of the customers I work with, they do significantly take a step back from Excel and they start to do significantly more reporting using the core reporting tools in Intacct as opposed to those in Excel. But of course, Excel will always exist in one way, shape or form. And therefore, anyone who says they will eradicate its use is probably telling you porky pies, but I would very much hope to be able to reduce that use if you wish. Of course, I do work with some customers who don't want to reduce their reliance on Excel, so each to their own.
Yeah, okay. I think for us, that's all dependent on our clients in regards to how they want their data presented to them. So some might see that the reports coming out of the new software might suit them, but some might see it as not suitable for them. So we'll just adapt it in that way.
Sure, and it's a bit like I've seen some organizations I've worked with where they tell their members of the organization how they will get their data. And I've worked with other organizations where it's the other way around. The budget owners and the departmental heads actually tell finance how they want the data and what kind of format. So you've got a bit of a mix. There are some significantly better and easier, more intuitive reporting tools within Sage Intacct, but you've also got that straight link to Excel if you wish. So if you've got people that want to consume it in Excel, then yes, you can be pushing that data out, and they need nothing more than Excel to open that. And even better if you use the scheduling capability in Intacct, because then you can send it, even if it's to external people who aren't in your organization, they can be receiving that kind of information through the automation and scheduling into Excel if that's what they choose.
Okay. And sorry, one last thing I just wanted to pick up on. I'm just sort of doing a comparison to 200 because that's what we predominantly use at the moment. Apart from all the reporting and the different design of reportings and the way you can manipulate what kind of report you want to get from Intacct, what's the main difference between this and 200 in regards to the background of all the data being stored? Is it what you touched on at the beginning about being able to log on to Intacct on any kind of browser rather than some sort of database that we currently use in 200 on now?
Got you. And another great question. So it does tend to be quite specific to a customer based on which modules in 200 they're using. But some recurring themes might be customers who do want true native cloud. So again, they want to move away from maybe the traditional solutions that are being hosted into a true modern cloud solution. And that might be because they've got other solutions that they want to nicely integrate. So Sage Intacct plays nicely with all other modern cloud solutions. We've got an open API and technical platform. So connecting Intacct to other solutions is normally much easier to do because it's more modern. Sometimes customers want to take use of the capability. So they say, well, in 200, I've got nominal cost center department, but I need property, project, grant, fund, site, location, property, whatever it might be. So sometimes they need better, more detailed analysis. Some people prefer the foreign currency enhancements, something as simple as taking in daily FX rates instead of me having to manage them myself. Other customers say, well, I like this concept of the different companies. If I'm running different companies, they aren't silos of data. They coexist together. So I can do consolidation. I can do intercompany movements. I can have that kind of shared services. And other customers, it might just be approvals. They want approvals, alerts, and workflows across their organization. Or they want to get more out of the finance system than just debits and credits. Maybe they've got other operational systems that they're using, and they might want to populate Intacct with some of that data, which means when I do my organizational reporting, I don't have to go to multiple different systems. My finance system holds my debits and credits, but also a lot of my other operational information. Having said that, there are modules in Intacct, such as, the project module, and some customers will say, well, I need better project management, and Intacct allows me to do things like project resourcing, project planning, looking at skill sets and assigning those to pieces of work. And other customers might say, actually, I want the contracts module in Intacct. We have contracts with our clients and we want to easily manage that. And as the contract changes, we want to be able to adapt and embrace that. Or as we touched on during the session, it might just be that I don't want to do things manually. My deferral and recognition, I want to automate. My approvals, I want to automate. My scanning of documents, I want to automate. So there are normally certainly trigger reasons for customers to move from 50 or indeed 200. They do tend to be quite unique and specific. And again, a conversation with Zaf and the team, they will be able to pinpoint exactly where the differences might lie for you, because clearly folks that don't use foreign currency wouldn't be too impressed with the foreign currency enhancements. That's not going to offer them value. And people without multi-company might not be impressed with the multi-company enhancements. So again, there's a whole plethora of different reasons why we're finding our customers are moving. But Zaf and the team could give you a much more detailed, specific, tailored response, because they will know inside out the parts of 200 that you're using and how and where things would be better and different in Intacct.
Okay. Thanks for that, Piers. Thanks.
No worries at all.
Thanks, everyone. And with that, we'll bring the session to a close. Thank you, Piers, for your time today. That was quite a comprehensive view of the system. As Piers has already said, if anyone has any questions or would like to find out more, please just reach out to the team here at TPL and we'll answer anything that we can for you. There is a recording of today's session. If anyone would like a copy of that, please just let me know and I'll get that sent over for you. So thank you again for your time today, everyone. Hope you found it useful and we'll speak to you soon. Thanks.
Bye-bye.